Hello friends, and welcome to another video. Today is going to be my July wrap-up. I read 18 books in July. I participated in Summerween and I felt like I read a good amount. So we got a lot of books to talk about. I did post some videos in July, including my Summerween vlog and a how much I actually read in a week vlog. So a lot of these books were a part of that. I also did some Patreon vlogs. One was for our slasher summer readathon that we did, and the other one was Summerween Part 2, where I read some of the other books that were on my TBR that I didn't get to for Summerween. I actually DNF'd 2 books in July, so we'll talk about those first. And then we'll just continue on to the books that I did end up finishing and reading. So the first DNF was The Counselors by Jessica Goodman. I feel like so many people told me I was not going to like this one, and you all were right. I DNF'd around page 165. I honestly was just really bored. I felt like the mystery was not that interesting, and I was losing interest the more I read instead of like gaining interest the more I read. So I just like felt like it was a chore every time I went to pick it up, and for those reasons I just knew I didn't care enough to finish, so I called it quits and I just DNF'd this one. The other DNF is probably the saddest one, honestly, and it was I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. I know he is a beloved author in the community. This is my 4th attempt at a Stephen Graham Jones book, and honestly, I cannot deal with his writing style. I don't like the stream of consciousness writing. I get really lost and I just can't focus when I read his books. There's something with the writing that just does not click in my brain, and it makes it super hard for me to continue reading his stuff. So I think this is going to be my last attempt, my final attempt. This was like my last chance with him, and since it didn't go well and I DNF'd around page 215, I think it's safe to say that me and Stephen Graham Jones do not get along. We'll go through the books that I read for Summerween next. I am not going to go into like a ton of detail because I did do a full reading vlog with all my thoughts and all my feelings, so I'll just like summarize how I felt about them. But probably my favorite read of July was the first book I picked for Summerween, and that was The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. I know this book has been getting so much hype in the community, and honestly it's so well deserved. In this book we are following a Korean American family, and the main character, her dad has recently left the family because he was having an affair, and her mother took it horribly, but she has a new boyfriend now who is very, very, very gross and not a good person. But our main character has these very weird dreams, and the dreams center around eyeballs. This is very unhinged. It's very much a slow descent into madness. Honestly, I fell in love with this. It was such a quick read. I was fully absorbed into this story, and I just loved every second of it. It didn't feel too slow. I loved where it went. I honestly feel like this is what I wanted from Mayfly. Mayfly was super disappointing to me and I really didn't like it. So this one was like what I craved. And honestly, it's probably the best horror release I've read this year because they have been so disappointing, and this is the only one to really stand out next to maybe like one other one. But like, this is my favorite by far of 2024. Then we have Night Film by Marisha Pessl. This was a very interesting experience to read. I was sent this by one of my patrons, Vanessa. Thank you so much, because this was like a wild story. It took me on a whole journey. This is like a thriller mystery where the daughter of this famous and like weird reclusive director, she dies, and her death is ruled a suicide, but this journalist starts investigating the death because he thinks that it's really suspicious, and he gets tangled into a web. This family has a lot of stuff going on. It's wild. I really, really enjoyed the formatting of this book because you are reading like articles, web pages. Like you're reading all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of like documents, and you really feel like you're investigating alongside the journalist. And I feel like the formatting really kept me intrigued because the story is really cool. It's all about like this underground film stuff and like this really weird director and this family's bizarre nature and like what's really going on with them, what's true, what's not true. It's very, very intriguing. It reads very, very, very slow. It is so long. It does not look that long, but it's over 500 pages. It's almost 600 pages. And with the added like documents and web pages and stuff that you're reading, it kind of takes longer instead of like a shorter amount of time. So I felt like I read this for like 6 years, but the story was so cool and so different and so unique that I could look past the slowness. So I really actually did like this, I think. The more I think about it, the more I really did like it, because it is a very dark, weird, disturbing story. Then we have Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter, and this is like a literary fiction. I thought this was like horror lit fic, but it's not really horror at all. Honestly, it's just kind of like a really depressing story. Our main character is working for this tech startup, and she thought it was like her dream job, but when she gets there and she realizes that she's like working extremely hard, living paycheck to paycheck, and it just doesn't really seem worth it, she kind of is really disappointed. Then she realizes she's pregnant, and her boss is like requiring her to do things that keep getting more and more crazy and unhinged and not legal. I think if I had different expectations for this one and I had not gone in thinking it was horror, I think I would have liked this more. I don't know why I thought it was horror. I don't know if someone told me that or I just like assumed, but I think because I was expecting something like that and it didn't deliver, I was disappointed. So I liked it, but it was very depressing. Like, it was a very depressing read, and honestly, I wasn't like in the best mindset when I was reading it, so I kind of had to take breaks while I was reading it, even though it's a very short read, because it was kind of affecting me mentally, and I was like, whoa, I need to put a pause on it. I did like the discussion around, you know, like hustle culture, working extremely hard with very little payoff, and how, you know, living is expensive, living is hard, and sometimes just working isn't enough. And so I did like that discussion, but again, very depressing. Very, 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 very depressing. And then we have a short story collection, At Home with the Horrors by Sammy Scott. I didn't love this one as much as everyone else seems to. I don't know if it's because I wasn't in the mood for a short story collection, but I just like wasn't feeling the stories. And it's kind of sad because a lot of them have to do with things that I liked. And I had that thing where they take very like mundane, everyday type of situations and then make it creepy and horrific, which is something I absolutely love, especially in a short story collection. But for whatever reason, it didn't really work out for me in this, and I was just kind of really ready for it to be over. I only had a few short stories that really stood out, and the last one is a really, really long novella, and I just didn't like that the last one was super long and it felt very unbalanced in my opinion. So it just kind of fell middle of the road for me, unfortunately, which I am really sad about. You know, I'm an R.L. Stine girly. I love Goosebumps. I love Fear Streets. So I had to include Party Summer by R.L. Stine for, you know, a little summer horror. You know, this is not his best work. I love R.L. Stine, I do, but I just wasn't really interested in this story. I felt like it was super, super, super boring. It's about these friends that decide to work at this inn over summer vacation, and they think that it's gonna be like this kind of like partying it up situation where they like don't have to work too much, but they can like also just have like a good time. But when they get there, it's deserted, and this guy tries to tell them like, no, you gotta leave, get out, and the owner is really bizarre and it's like haunted. I just felt like it was super predictable. which I mean, like, yes, it's a Fear Street. I know it could be pretty predictable for most people, but like extremely predictable. And I don't know, I was just kind of bored. Like, I mean, I thought the like setting was really cool at this inn, and it's off like Cape Cod, so I did really like where it was, but I think the overall story just wasn't that fun for me. I wasn't really that invested. Second to last for Summerween was Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. This I've had on my TBR for a really long time. I ended up including it for Summerween because it was really, really short, and I don't want to go into this too much in detail because I feel like, one, I don't really know how to explain it, and two, I feel like going in blind is kind of a better experience. But I was a little nervous for this one because it is more on the fantasy side, and I will say the first half of this I was like, absolutely not. I cannot do this. I can't get into it. I'm not enjoying it, not liking it. No way. Absolutely not. But then I started kind of getting attached in the second half, and I kind of like, I think, grasped the story a bit better and like what was going on and stuff like that, and I ended up really enjoying it actually. I liked the writing, and I think the story is very, very unique. I think it's very cool, and I think it's a cool way to tell the kind of story it is. So yeah, it ended up really surprising me actually. Lastly is Message Not Found by Dante Medema. Basically about this girl whose best friend dies in this car accident, and because she's grieving so much, she finds this AI software that's like this chat bot, and the more information she uploads to it, like her friends and her texts and the friends' social media and stuff, the more the chat bot can talk like her friend. So she ends up chatting to this AI chatbot, and she starts realizing she didn't really know everything that was going on with her friend, and the death of her friend feels a little bit more mysterious. I think I expected this to be a thriller. It is not a thriller. It's kind of more just of like a grief story with a little teeny tiny bit of mystery. I kind of wish there was more mystery to it. I think it would have been better for me. It is an extremely, extremely, extremely fast, quick read because a lot of what you're reading is just like chat, so it reads extremely fast. But overall, I just felt like the story was okay. Again, I think I went in expecting a thriller. It's not, so it was just kind of a letdown. I ended up reading 2 Star Wars books in July, which I'm still on my Star Wars book experience, journey, whatever you want to call it. First, I read Padawan by Kiersten White, which I thought was very funny because I have read Kiersten White before. It was just her horror books, as in Hyde and Mr. Magic, so it was very interesting to see her write something different that wasn't horror, and I actually really enjoyed this one. Obi-Wan isn't one of my favorite Star Wars characters, but I did like seeing him as a Padawan and kind of understanding him a bit more when he was younger and before he met Anakin and when he was learning from Qui-Gon. I just think that it was a very interesting read, and I did have fun with it. More fun than I thought it was going to be. I ended up actually liking this, and I like that I actually enjoyed this author's book for once. And the second Star Wars book was Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray, which is about Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. It's about their relationship as master and apprentice, and they're kind of on a mission together. You kind of learn about their relationship a little bit more and how they work together, and kind of how Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship really mirrors Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. And this one was very emotional for me just because Qui-Gon is one of my favorite characters, and I liked getting to see a lot more of him, so that was really exciting for me. I liked this one a lot. I had a good time with it. It was pretty emotional actually, but I'm also a crybaby, so I don't know, that could just be me. Then we have a very popular horror release that everyone is buzzing about, and that is Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. This is a story told from the perspective of an 8-year-old, and she has this entity that she talks to called Other Mommy, and I picked it up because I thought it was going to be similar to Coraline. I'm a big Coraline fan. Other Mother, Other Mommy, just they sounded very similar. And I was kind of intrigued by the book being told from the perspective of an 8-year-old. Plus, everyone's been hyping this up as like the scariest horror book they've read, or like the scariest horror book release of 2024. So I just had to check it out for myself. I didn't love this. I think there are a lot of creepy imagery in this story, which I can understand why it was scary to other people. It wasn't necessarily scary for me, which is fine. I wasn't necessarily expecting something super scary. I think my problem was I didn't really care about the overall story. I felt like the parents were really irritating characters. I feel like they basically ignored their daughter the entire book. And I don't know, maybe there was like an entity trying to latch onto her. I'm just like, can you like get with the program? You guys are like obsessed with your own trauma, and your daughter is like having this hello other mommy. That's like terrifying. How are you guys not paying attention more? So that was a little irritating to me. I just think I was disappointed by the overall plot and where it went. I thought it was just kind of like, okay, yeah, that's fine. I'm really sad because everyone's been loving this one like a lot. I'm kind of upset that I didn't love it as much, but I'm glad I gave it a read and that I tried another Josh Malerman to see if I liked it. Then I have a book that was sent to me. This is Wilderness Reform by Matt Query and Harrison Query. This is about the main character who is, I believe, 13. I think he's 13, and he gets sent to this juvenile reform program. It's like a camp for troubled teenagers, and when he gets there, you know, things seem fine, except the camp counselors are very, very weird, and they act very odd, and just something seems off. I did not love Old Country by these authors. It was like my worst book last year, or one of the worst books I read last year. So I was a little hesitant about this one, and honestly it was fine, but it wasn't anything wild or spectacular. I felt like it was really, really, really slow. It felt like it took forever for anything to actually happen, and also I felt like the characters, who are all 13 to like 14 years old, they did not read that age. They felt like they were so much older, and there is kind of an explanation as to why for the main character, but it was just unbelievable to me and unrealistic, and it was just like kind of silly to read. I ended up actually really liking the last 60 to 80 pages of the book, so I'm kind of disappointed that the rest of the book didn't feel the same for me, because I think it would have had a higher rating if that had happened. But this just felt very middle of the road for me. Another book that I feel like is a fan favorite, a lot of people have had a lot of high praise for this one, and that is Anyman by Amber Tamblyn. This is a horror novel about a serial rapist named Maud, and she is a woman and she attacks men. I think the idea of this story is really, really good. I think the conversation that is trying to be had with this book is very, very good. For me, I did not like the writing. There is a lot of like poetry involved, and I just didn't really get along with the writing. It didn't mesh well with me, and I felt like it kind of took away the impact of the story for me personally. So while I liked what the story was trying to do, I just didn't really like how it was doing it. So unfortunately, this also falls very middle of the road for me, which I'm very sad about because I know it's very well loved. I know a ton of people really, really liked this one. I just didn't really vibe with it. Another very middle of the road book is The New Neighbor by Carter Wilson. This is about the protagonist who actually wins the lottery on the day of his wife's funeral. So he takes that money, he takes his kids, they move to a new place, move to a new house, try to start over, and then they start getting these mysterious kind of ominous letters saying that they're watching them. For a book that feels kind of long for a thriller, it reads really fast, but it's really, really boring. like really boring. There was nothing really special about this kind of story. I felt like it was very predictable and very, I don't know, there was just nothing that stood out to me. I feel like I'll forget about this book in the next few weeks. Honestly, I barely remember reading it at this point. So I just don't think it's gonna have a long-lasting impression on me. And I just think that I've read better thrillers. Another horror book that I've had on my TBR for a very long time is Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang. I have heard so many people absolutely adore this book and talk so highly about it. And I had kind of high expectations going into this one, which I think kind of bit me in the butt. I didn't dislike this book, but I didn't absolutely fall head over heels in love with it like I feel like so many people did. I don't really want to go into the plot of this one. I think it's just something that you need to like read and find out for yourself, but it definitely talks about like beauty and society's ideals of beauty and stuff like that. Has racism involved in this story because our main character is Chinese. So there is a lot going on, and I think for a literary horror novel, it does really well and it reads really quickly. It does remind me a lot of Rouge by Mona Awad. So if you like that kind of book, I feel like you would also really like this. I gave Rouge 4 stars, and I do think I like this one just like a hair more, but not a lot. Like I feel like they're very equal. I don't know, it just didn't hit 5-star territory for me, unfortunately. It didn't become a new favorite, but I did really enjoy it and I did like the commentary it had. So, I mean, it was an enjoyable experience. Then we have Lost Man's Lane by Scott Carson. This is a horror book that was sent to me, and I didn't know if I was gonna like this. It felt like it was really long, and it actually was kind of long. Our main character in this one just got his license. It's in 1999, and as he's driving home from getting his license, he gets stopped by the police. When the police officer pulls him over, the conversation turns aggressive, and he notices in the back of the police car is a teen girl, and she looks very distraught and very upset. And the cop is very aggressive with him. He's very scary. I mean, this kid just got his license, so he is not being very compassionate. However, just a few weeks later, this kid sees this girl again, but her face is on a missing poster. And then he finds out that the cop that pulled him over wasn't even a real cop. I think if you enjoy Stephen King, if you enjoy books like The Outsider, you'll probably enjoy this. This is a coming of age story. It's really about our main character. It's about him growing up in the 90s. It talks a lot about stuff that is happening currently in the 90s because it is 1999. Y2K is being talked about. Columbine is being talked about. I mean, there's a lot of like 90s stuff happening, and that is a big chunk of the plot. It is very important to the story in terms of it's just referenced a ton. I think a lot of people will enjoy it. Personally, I think the book is just too long for me, and I just got kind of bored and I was just kind of ready for it to be over, honestly. So I liked it. I didn't really love it. We have another popular author here, and that is One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. This is actually my third Ruth Ware, and this is actually my favorite by Ruth Ware. I can definitely see a lot of people not liking this one, but for whatever reason, it really worked for me. This is about a couple who decide to audition for this reality TV show, dating show. It's called One Perfect Couple. And our main protagonist, she is a scientist, and she doesn't really want to audition for the show, but her partner wants to be an actor, so he thinks this is gonna like jumpstart his career. So she ends up doing it for him. And they end up going to this tropical deserted island, and things just take a turn the minute that they get there. And then this story turns into a survival story. I don't think this book is like anything groundbreaking. I definitely feel like there are a lot of books that feel similar to this one and do a similar plot. However, I loved the reality TV show aspect. My one complaint is that it doesn't play a huge part during the second half of the story. It's mainly just the first half. I think if it had been more involved in the second half, it probably would have been a 5-star for me. I think this was exactly what I needed at the time that I was reading it. It was very easy, it was fun, it was fast-paced, it was entertaining, and honestly, I actually really liked where the ending went. It's not a surprising ending, it's not anything like super twisty, but it was enjoyable to me, and it is a type of ending that I typically like in stories. So I don't know, something just kind of worked for me. This is a fun time. I don't think you should go in expecting anything like wild and mind-blowing, but I think it's an easy read, and I think that if you like survival stories, you'll probably at least enjoy some of this. Another very talked about book is Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. Now, Riley Sager, he's very hit or miss. I know some people really love his books. I know some people find his books very mediocre. I tend to really enjoy his books because I go in expecting something easy. I go in expecting a fun time, and that's about it. In this one, we're following this character who in 1994 was camping in his backyard with his best friend, and his best friend went missing. And now, 30 years later, he's gone back to his childhood home, and some interesting things around the neighborhood start happening, and he starts trying to figure out what really happened that night. I know what the criticisms of this book are. I know a lot of people don't like the ending. However, I really liked the journey that this book took me on. I think that from beginning to end, it was a very enjoyable experience for me. I liked the 90s flashbacks, I liked the missing person aspect, and I liked that I never knew if it was supernatural or not. Sometimes that really irritates me, but I think in this book it kind of worked out, and that's probably because of something that happens towards the end I liked. Do I think that the ending was a little bit lackluster? Yes, I think the reveal was a little bit lame. I feel like the ending is very wholesome. I feel like it's kind of like an emotional ending. It's very like sweet, which I can see a lot of people not enjoying, but I am a sucker. I like sweet, happy endings. So I feel like it actually worked for me and worked in my favor, and I ended up really enjoying it. I don't know, the more I think about this book, the more I actually really like it. I don't know. I know that's such an unpopular opinion, I know, but there's something about this one. It's slowly moved its way up to the top for Riley Sager for me. There was just something about it that worked. I had a good time, and that's all I can ask for when I read a Riley Sager, honestly. My last book to talk about is my other favorite book from July, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. So this was kind of like my second attempt at cozy fantasy. I read Howl's Moving Castle last month. I actually don't remember when I read it, but that was like my first little toe dip into cozy fantasy, and this was sent to me by one of my patrons. Again, thank you, Vanessa. And I've heard so many good things about this one. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if I was gonna like it, but you know what? It was so cute. It was really, really cute. Look, I know nothing about fantasy. Because I know nothing about fantasy, I don't know how this compares to a lot of other cozy fantasy or just regular fantasy in general, so I'm probably not the best judge of character for this. I'm probably not the best person to like take their opinion on this book, but I had a really good time while reading it. At first, I wasn't sure because it was a little hard for my brain to turn on that fantasy switch and realize like, you're not reading horror, you're not reading thriller, you need to get into the mode of fantasy. So it was a little harder for me to like turn that on, but I feel like once I did and I got into it, I got into the characters, and I got a little bit more, you know, like invested, I had a really good time with it. So if you have any recommendations for other cozy fantasy you think I would enjoy, please let me know, because I really don't know what I'm doing, but I did like this, so if that helps you, help me, please. Well, alright, that is it for the 18 books that I read in July. It was definitely good in terms of quantity, but not so good in terms of quality, so I'm hoping that August we can turn things around. That's what I read. I would love to know if you agree, disagree with me on any of these. What did you read in July? What was your favorite, least favorite? I love hearing how your reading month went as well, so definitely let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this wrap up, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. That way I know that I should keep doing wrap ups for you all in the future. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I also have a Patreon linked down in the description box. We can become friends, talk about books, horrifying books, thrilling books, romance books, manga, all that good fun stuff. And with that being said, I hope you are having a great day, night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!